Hi, welcome all. Great. It's a very tough act to follow, and in fact, a tougher thing to digest just after lunch as well. So we're still in that haze. But we'll try to do our best. We have a brilliant panel of achievers, super achievers, extremely high achievers. And what we are here to discuss today is something that at least gets talked about a lot. I'm not sure how many of us really understand what is going on and how important it is. But today, that is something that we want to discuss. We are here to discuss about climate change, how corporates have a big role to play in it. And I'm sure all of us are convinced that we need to do it. But the way I want to look at it is through some of the images and some of the anecdotes that get thrown around. As an engineer, we typically are very skeptical. There aren't always good data points to support a lot of what gets strung around with loud voices when we hear it on TVs, when we see it on the road. So today, I think I have a very high possibility of understanding the true nature and the data behind it and what we can do about it as well. So the first question that always strikes me as whether it is actually true is, are humans responsible for climate change? I mean, people say that we are, but is there a statistically significant correlation between human existence and climate change? So, and again, I think in my whatever lifespan, today I have the highest probability of finding out whether that is right or not, because I have Abhilasha. Abhilasha is just another IT grad, just another Fulbright Yale scholar, and she's into creating and finding and mining data specifically for climate and pollution and the change that is being created. So Abhilasha, question to you. Please, are we responsible for climate change? And is it really that bad?
It is really bad, and we are responsible. Let me give some history, and I'll throw some numbers, so this is going to the most boring part, but then we'll set up the stage for the further conversation. Back in 1912, Guardian published a report about all the coal-powered chimneys across the world which were emitting carbon emissions. And then they wrote that this carbon emissions is going to create a GHG effect, a greenhouse gas effect, which will lead to a global warming. Then in 1940s, we used to produce 5 billion tons of carbon emission. Today, guess a number, how much emissions we produce?
15.
North of 55 billion tons.
Wow.
In all of our years of conversations of COP and ESG and all these words, we haven't reduced our carbon emissions any of these years, except for 2020 of COVID, when almost 3 billion people on the planet were in lockdown by barely 4 to 5%. And giving an example, or giving a sort of fact of the planetary history, in 800,000 years of history, so let's run that number in our head. In 800,000 years of our planetary history, with all different species living on the planet, our carbon concentration only oscillated between 200 to 300 ppm. When I was born in 1990, it was 354 ppm. Now guess what is the number today? We are about to cross 420 ppm.
Wow.
The last most warming cycle that we had was at 300 ppm, and the planet warmed by 1.6 degrees. We have already crossed a warming of 1.1 degrees, and we have from 300 ppm, 418 ppm to go. So we have all the warming to still be actualized, because the planet is a very complex system. So it doesn't respond instantly. It's going to respond over time. And to set the stage for all the other panelists now, our duty, and I think Rishi in the previous conversation has kind of put that onus upon us, that we have to really care for our planet and really care for our survival long term. Thanks.
Wow, okay. That was like they say, Dubara mat puchna. So, okay. So now that we have unequivocally established that the situation is dire, that we are definitely responsible, and that in this room, we have to take responsibility to try and stabilize and, if possible, reverse it. I would now like to bring in Seher. Seher is somebody, I think, who has the most understanding of environment. She has only gone to a few universities like Oxford, Loyola, Cambridge, and most recently INSEAD. I mean, everybody has to go to B school, right? And she has learned about the environment, about environmental economics. Wow, that's so cool. And also, she is now in a fabulous business, and may I add, a very glamorous business of a company called Bare Necessities, where she creates sustainable products, cosmetics, etc. So I really want to ask you, Seher, what is it that we need to do? It is dire, but what are things that we can do, and what are you doing in terms of helping with reversing this climate change?
Yeah, cool. Thanks so much, first of all, for that very generous introduction.
I had more, actually. So.
No, he's really making me sound way cooler than I am. But hi, everyone. I'm Seher. I run a business called Bare Necessities. And the idea is to kind of reimagine consumption. You know, we're talking about conscious consumption, but we shouldn't really be titling it conscious consumption. By default, we should just be living more sustainably. And you know, if we look at the products that we use on a daily basis, it could be a plastic toothbrush that you used this morning, shampoos, conditioners, kind of like Rishi mentioned. Everything comes in plastic, right? There's this huge plastic footprint associated with it. We toss it out in a month, and then it lands up sitting on this planet for 700 odd years, and basically never ever kind of goes away, right? It just kind of decomposes into microplastics. So Bare Necessities is built with this premise that we can recreate sustainable products that are designed not to land up in the oceans and landfills. And we're doing so by creating sustainable green jobs. So we have a local women-run manufacturing team. All of them, most of them, it's their first job, right? So we're trying to build a case that it's not just environmental sense, it also makes economic sense, and it also makes social sense. And you know, honestly, for me personally, it was working with waste pickers, following them all around Bangalore city. You know, I worked with a community very closely that was near Bangalore International Airport. And it's just crazy how fancy our international airport is. And then not very far away, there's this community that has no access to electricity or lighting, you know, informal community. And really, I think I got my education there, while I might have studied at different universities, but really I consider my education around waste really from the waste warriors. And noticing the conditions, of course, in which they were segregating our waste, broken glass, sanitary napkins, all of that really made me kind of think about, there's just got to be a better way to do this. And that's why, you know, we started. And I think what can we all do? You know, just being a little mindful about all of our everyday actions, using our reusable water bottle, maybe thinking or exploring and buying an electric vehicle rather than maybe just one that's, you know, petrol-based or diesel-based, using a bamboo toothbrush or a miswak stick, carrying your cloth bags to the grocery store, walking, embracing walkability, riding your bike, perhaps. Maybe you don't need to take your car everywhere. And all of those tiny actions actually do matter. I mean, for the first time in India, we saw the Himalayas from more than 100 kilometers away in the pandemic, in the first wave. That is proof that that basically when there was less vehicles on the road and there is less emissions, the air quality is better. I mean, I think we all felt it. We all could kind of hear the birds. You know, we noticed the air was cleaner, et cetera, especially in the first wave, you know, when the first lockdown hit. And I think that's a very tangible way in which we could say, you know what, actions do matter. And we can, of course, reverse engineer what's going on.
Yeah, interesting. Thank you so much for that, Sarah. And I'll come back to you on certain interesting items. But what I want to do now is just bring the discussion a lot closer to where we are right now as GCC leaders and GCC future leaders. What is it that we can do and what are we supposed to do? And again, I am in luck. I have two very brilliant panelists. I have Mani, who is part of Amadeus. He heads the engineering there. Amadeus, as you know, is a Spanish firm. It makes the world's largest selling travel platforms. And we also have Venkat. Venkat is actually the head of sustainability at Schneider here locally. And Schneider, to me, is very interesting because it is almost a 200-year-old firm. And a firm cannot be can sustain that long without being sustainable. So it's always good to understand how he, as the head of sustainability, is working in Schneider. But before I go there, first question I have is mainly on the industry and how industry is seeing all of this change, and how is it trying to react, and how are the products evolving accordingly? So Mani, first to you, what do you see happening in travel industry, and how are things changing, and how are you adapting on that side?
Okay. Thank you, Siddhant. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, Zinnov, for the opportunity to talk on this important topic. Actually, before we start solving these problems, I was thinking if we just give another 2 years to Rishi, he just walked out, maybe he will find the solutions for all the sustainability challenges we are facing. Amazing talk, tough act to follow after that brilliant kid. Okay, then coming to the travel industry, right? Sometime in the 2018-2019 timeframe, we started seeing a small, introducing Amadeus. We are the largest technology provider. We provide the largest SaaS platform on which travel functions in the entire world. Sometime in we power more than 1 billion, billion and a half travels that are happening in the world on our platform, right? So we took a lot of pride in that there are more than close to 2 billion passengers that are mobilized in the world happening on the Amadeus platform. Sometime in 2018-19, we saw a small storm come up in the Nordic countries, starting in Sweden, where suddenly we started hearing this term called flight scam, or flight scam, right? Mm-hmm. It's called flight shaming. So where people started shaming others who are traveling, taking a flight and traveling across the world, and that made us sit up and take notice, saying, okay, here's a disruption coming in one corner of the world, and then we started to see it spread across other countries and other continents. Even though that in itself did not have a tangible impact on our business and our revenues and so on, but we knew that we had to take this seriously and had to do something about it. And then came the pandemic, where the entire, we saw the mother of all disruptions, especially for a business like Amadeus. It was a huge disruption. But what we also saw was, it's the third time I heard today that we sat in Delhi and saw the Himalayas, right? So obviously, the world citizens started taking note around the environment and how as humans we have ignored the environment and how it is something that we have caused a big impact. Your first question, we have caused a big impact, and the pandemic brought that to the forefront, right? So now, then if we look at Amadeus, what are we doing about it as a company, right? So our environmental sustainable strategy is based on 3 pillars. The first one is how are we environmentally efficient in our own operations? So Amadeus runs the largest civilian data center in Europe, and we get millions and millions of transactions coming into our data center that we have operated on our own for the last 30-35 years. And we declared it to be carbon neutral by 2030, and we have already achieved that for ourselves much ahead of time. So That's something we did as an internal massive initiative. So we are fully carbon neutral now in our operations. Then our second pillar is based on how are we helping our customers be more environment efficient by providing green software engineering or green solutions. Now, I'm sure a lot of you, when you have sat in a flight and you have peeked out of the window, you would have seen the cargo getting loaded, right? All these big containers, it's called the ULDs, that are going into the flight, into the underbelly of the aircraft. There are products built by Amadeus which help airlines distribute that load or in an equivalent basis based on the type of aircraft, based on the number of passengers that are seated on the main deck, and based on the seating allocation across the flight. Right? It's called a weights and balance product. Now, we had created this product some years back, mainly to save aviation fuel for airlines, because that's a huge operational cost that airlines experience. So we had created this product. It's being used by many airlines in the world. But now that same product is getting a lot more impetus, because now it's not only helping our customers' business, but it's also making the environment a lot more carbon efficient.
Right.
So we already have products like that, which is helping our customers. And the third aspect around our environment sustainability strategy is partnerships. Right? So we are looking at how we can partner with like-minded companies. So recently, we joined the Green Software Foundation. It's a foundation that has been made by companies like Accenture, Microsoft, GitHub, and ThoughtWorks. It's a think tank of like-minded individuals who are coming together and making sure there are enough standards and tools and practices for green software development. So that's one example of a partnership we have struck.
Green software, that is interesting.
Green Software Foundation, right? We also have recently invested in a company which is a climate tech company called Choose. Now that's an interesting company, right? What it does is it has its own advanced algorithms to calculate the carbon emission of every flight that takes off. If you put a source and a destination, it will tell you, and the number of passengers, it will tell you this is the carbon footprint that this flight is leaving in the world.
Do you need a
right?
startup to do that?
Yes. And so it calculates that for not only flights, but ground transportation, for accommodation, and so on. And Amadeus has invested in this company. And what we are doing now is incorporating these kind of algorithms into the search algorithms we have. So when travelers like you in the near future start looking at flight options, you will start seeing the carbon emission that your booking is going to cause. And then comes the next step, which is how do you offset this?
So that data is coming from your platform.
Yes.
The one that you see on most Google
Absolutely.
flights. Yeah.
Right? And then how do you offset this? By going to a concept called sustainable aviation fuel.
Interesting.
Right? Which is a replacement or an alternative coming to the regular fossil fuel, that jet fuel that the airlines are using. So now you will soon get an option to say, okay, I am taking this flight, it's leaving this much carbon footprint, but now I am ready to pay a little surcharge so that my flight is environmental friendly and I use sustainable aviation fuel. So these are some of the initiatives that are transforming the industry and the work Amadeus is doing.
Wow, that's so cool. Never thought that a travel platform would have such a huge impact. Thank you so much, Mani. That was very enlightening. Venkat, over to you, right? So again, as an energy management firm, I'm sure you're at the forefront of trying to think about sustainability, climate change. So how has your industry changed, adapted? What are you doing? We can hear you.
Yeah. Good afternoon, and thanks, Siddhant. Thanks, Zinnov, to giving this opportunity to be in this panel. Sorry about that. That's the perfect timing, I guess. Yeah. So, I'm from the energy space, and Abhilasha did talk about some very interesting facts. Just a few seconds on the overall energy landscape, the way we are seeing in the world. The energy consumption has increased 40 times in this century versus the previous century. 80% of greenhouse gases are on account of burning the fossil fuels for fulfilling the energy demand. So this is how it is today. And we all consume energy in different areas, in different spheres of our life. So fundamentally, if we talk about, let's say, emissions, decarbonization, sustainability, energy is right at the center of the whole thing. Just to give another important data point, 2019, energy-specific emissions in the world were close to 30 gigatons, all right, out of overall, whatever, 45, 50. 30 gigatons are specific to the energy-related emissions. And what are they? These are the emissions on account of energy that we use in buildings, in industries, in our homes, for transportation. So this entire set of end-use energy consumption leads to 30 gigaton of CO2 in the atmosphere. Now look at this. For us to be on the right trajectory of temperature rise or global warming, we need to drastically bring down these emissions. Today, with all the commitments of all the nations, organizations, institutes, everything put together, we are possibly reducing only about, let's say, 3 gigaton of CO2 per annum. And this is now putting us on a trajectory of temperature rise of 2.4 degree to 2.7 degree. And this is hopelessly inappropriate for a planet like ours. Climate scientists have gone on record to say that the temperature rise has to be within 1.5 degree for this planet by the end of this century. Now, how do we do that? What is that you all can contribute? At Schneider, we have our own Sustainability Research Institute, and just some few insights. The way we look at solving this whole thing is, first, how do we become energy efficient? In whichever form we use our energy, how can we become energy efficient, right? Today, most of the energy is powered by burning fossil fuels. Inherently, these fossil fuel-based energy systems are inefficient. Let me give you an example. We burn 3 units of coal in a coal-fired power plant. We get 1 unit of electricity at our home. So you know efficiency, we are all engineers, right? Output divided by input, right? So 30% efficiency here. Absolutely poor efficiency. If you talk about automobiles, 10 units of fuel in the, let's say, tank of our car, we get 1.2 unit of energy, which actually moves the wheels on the road. So what is the efficiency we're talking about? 12%. So these fossil fuel-based overall energy systems are horribly inefficient. So first we need to kind of find an alternative. So what are we trying to say here? First, be efficient in your energy consumption. And by the way, energy efficiency has a big, big potential. We all work in buildings. Most of the times we spend our life in buildings. Best-in-class energy efficiency buildings are 85% more energy efficient than normal buildings. That is the kind of potential of energy efficiency. Second, what we need to do is electrify more and more. This may not be very much applicable for all of you. This is mainly for the industries. In industries, even today, to generate a lot of heat, they burn fossil fuels. We want to get rid of the fossil fuel burning energy systems. We want to electrify. And one example, as we are seeing the energy transition, is automobiles. Automobiles is precisely that. The EV coming in is precisely the whole approach of electrifying more and more our economy. This is the second point. And the third point is, how do you decarbonize your supply side? You see, electricity is a very, very important vector of decarbonization. Why? Because electricity on the consumption side can be efficiently used. On the supply side, you can have renewables, you can have green electricity coming in. So by far, electricity is a very, very important and potentially energy efficient kind of energy source. So I think these are 3 things, just to summarize. Optimize your energy usage, electrify more and more, and decarbonize your supply. When you do this, as per our calculations, we certainly can bring down the emissions by 50% by 2030, and actually can get it to near zero by 2050, and then we are back to 1.5 degree temperature rise trajectory in the planet. So I'll stop here.
That's very heartening to hear.
Yeah, sorry?
That's very heartening to hear.
Absolutely, we all can do it. You and me, all of us can do it.
But Abhilasha will measure it.
Sure.
So Abhilasha, so I come to you, right? So the title of the panel is the triple bottom line. And as you know, triple bottom line is a concept which is more than at least 2.5, 3 decades old. Do you think it is still valid? And I'm sure a lot of your customers are like private equities or large corporates trying to measure how they are green or not so green. Do you see them implementing this? If yes, then how? And if not, then is there something else that works best?
I think just the rapid growth of my company, which we started 3 years ago, and in the first 6 months, everyone was like, you should open a non-profit, or are you trying to open a non-profit? But just the amount of inbound and the customer queries we get is a testament to the fact that as a business or as an economy, it's no longer just triple bottom line, but climate and environment and sustainability is critical to the bottom line. And taking the point of Venkat, which he mentioned about efficiency forward, let's say there's a business where you put in $1 or 1 rupee and you get 2 rupees out, versus another business where you put in 1 rupee and you get 10 rupees out. Which one is more efficient? Which one are you going to put your money into? So at the end of the day, all the sustainability or efficiency and cuts really become about that bottom line. It's about input, output, and profits. And I'll give an example. We recently did sort of a large study. As a company, we monitor the entire planet, essentially analyzing terabytes of satellite data for everything from global carbon emissions from all the power plants, all the flood modeling, all the wildfire emissions from those wildfires. And we started to monitor the electrification rate across the world, especially a lot of cities in America and Europe. And we found, we will release this a little later, but one of our early findings is that European cities electrify less at night as compared to American cities. So when we talk about, let's say, a Seattle or a San Francisco or New York, between 2 a.m. to 5 a.m., when all of that beautiful skyline is lit, but nobody is actually in those buildings. If we were to just turn that off, how many tons of carbon are we talking about? So as we talk about in terms of decarbonization, especially for energy sector, but I would extend that to not just energy, but all of our personal consumption, we talk about replacement. So let's replace solar or let's replace coal with solar. But what about reduction?
Yeah.
Because reduction has the most massive gains. We are a very energy addicted or oil addicted society. Our fashion and to Saher's business, all of our personal care and cosmetics, what is it? It's oil. It's all coming from oil companies. So the economic line that goes is, the oil is drilled by ExxonMobil or BP or Shell. It goes to DuPont and Dow Chemicals to make plastics. It goes to Reliance to make plastic. It goes to L'Oreal and Estee Lauder to make all the cosmetics. It goes to H&M and Zara to make all the fabric, all of stuff which we don't need, because 50% of fashion is actually gone from the store to the customer to the landfill without being worn even once. The biggest gain in climate, and that's why we really focused on building a company around intelligence layer, because if we can provide this information to the right kind of actors, to the guys who are doing investment management, to the guys who are doing insurance, if we are able to provide this information and we can highlight the inefficiencies, forget about sustainability or carbon footprint. We are just highlighting how inefficient certain businesses are, where you're putting $1 and getting barely $1, while there is another comparable business where you're putting $1 and getting $10. And I think that is where most of the value creation for us as people and as economy will lie.
Wow, that's so cool. Thank you so much, Abhilasha. The next one I would like to come to Seher, right? So Seher, you're in, I don't know, at least from the face of it looks like a very difficult business. It's almost like what Abhilasha said, it's kind of not-for-profit kind of business. But what does it take to kind of have a sustainable native business, especially in the Indian entrepreneurship ecosystem? Was it hard? Was it difficult? Do you see more folks like yourself?
Yeah, definitely. That's a great question. Honestly, since I started, which has now been 6 years ago, I think the ecosystem is definitely, has matured more. I see like a mushrooming of more sustainable businesses, and that could spread from fashion to ethical consumption to, different models of delivery. But I would say that the investment landscape hasn't matured at the same pace.
Okay.
So actually, investors are still asking you, just solely what you can express on an Excel spreadsheet, right? But what about the intangibles? What about the social impact? What about the environmental impact that you can literally never capture in one number on a cell on an Excel spreadsheet? So I think that's kind of the challenge. And I think, honestly, the EU is doing a really good job of looking at circular economy models and what that means for the future, right?
Can you spend a minute on circular economy and,
yeah, sure.
and
so
how you're ensuring that?
Yeah, so the idea of circular economy is to basically design waste completely out of the system. Right? So at Bare Necessities, we're providing sustainable products that are packaged in a recyclable, reusable, or fully compostable packaging. So the idea is you don't have to put anything into your trash can. And that means your shampoo bars, you just wash away, it goes, melts back, it's non-polluting ingredients, it's not harming the groundwater, right? Even the ink that we use is vegetable dye, we use recycled paper. So really you can compost, maybe the sleeve that the soap comes with without any kind of negative impact on the environment. And we have a refill program. So if people are in Bangalore, want to come by, refill their products, you're more than welcome. I mean, we've all done this with Kirana shops and, Pepsi bottles and Coke bottles when we were younger, right? We would get back the 50 paisa if we gave back the deposit. And so these models, I mean, the tiffin walas, the dabba walas are like a classic example of that. And I think it's so traditionally Indian, actually, circular economy and sustainability. And somewhere we kind of got wrapped up in this web of convenience and that to-go coffee in the morning and, in that rush of all of that. I mean, I know it's made life more convenient, but at what cost?
Right.
So the idea is to kind of rewire and reimagine a way in which we could create a more sustainable, more just world where we are being really cognizant of those social metrics, environmental metrics, and economic metrics. And I think this is the only way forward. The way of doing business has to be one that is kind of environmentally just, socially just, and makes economic sense as well.
So what you're saying is there is no other way to do business than a sustainable business.
Absolutely.
I think that's a very powerful statement. That's interesting. Good. So again, getting back to the GCC ecosystem, So, Mani Venkat, you are at the forefront of trying to drive this, right? But what can all of us do to build in this sustainability DNA into the GCC ecosystem?
Okay, so I'll talk about, I earlier talked about the Green Software Foundation. So there are now frameworks available which measure the software carbon intensity of a software product.
I think we should have an award for that as well next time.
Right. So now we're all, most of us are in engineering organizations, and we keep churning out code and write a lot of while, for loops and so on to execute software. But now we have the ability to assign a software carbon intensity score for every software product that gets defined. Right? So that's one of the focus areas in engineering, which is to see if we can measure the software, the SCI index. And then there are several factors which contribute to an SCI index. There is the hardware efficiency, there is the software efficiency, storage efficiency, there is the network efficiency, the amount of logging that you do from your software platform, the amount of CPU that you consume for a piece of code. So all these contribute to the software carbon intensity of an engineering organization, and we are measuring all that.
Wow.
And then we're also not trying to do this all alone. We have been running our own data center for the last 35 years now, and we're doing a pretty good job, but our power usage efficiency, obviously, doing it ourselves is not as good as if we manage to partner with an hyperscaler. So we are partnering with Microsoft and hoping that we will significantly improve the PUE ratio, or the power usage efficiency ratio of the software that we run. So that's one aspect. The second aspect is, of course, creating awareness in the engineering organizations. And there again, we are partnering with an NGO which is running a lot of climate fresh workshops. So all our engineers are expected to go through the awareness workshops around the climate crisis and how software is contributing to that and so on. So that we are creating awareness. And then, of course, we are generally trying to see how our employees can contribute. And we recently launched Green is the New Blue. Our corporate color is blue. So we launched a Green is the New Blue initiative, where we told our employees, for every small step that you take, we will plant a tree in the Amazon forest.
Wow.
And after the initiative ran, we planted 16,000 trees in the Amazon forest, right, using partnering with an NGO. So you can see that employees are, of course, wanting to participate in these initiatives. So that's the other focus we have.
Wow, so cool.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mani. Venkat, what about you? What are some of the top initiatives that you have taken to?
Yeah, I think before coming to the initiatives, I want to make a few points. You see, if you see the overall discussions we are talking about, we have analytics, we have solution, we have products, which are all sustainable, right? Now, what is really holding us from really aggressively moving the needle on sustainability? I think it's all about, don't take me wrong, it's all about intent and owning it up. You know, Siddhant, if you've been to a shop, when you go to a, let's say, crockery shop or a shop where there are a lot of glassware, you see that thing in the shop, right? You break it, you own it, right? Exactly similar is the situation for us. You damaged it, you own it, and you pay for it. I think this intent is extremely important. Other big challenge in sustainability, which generally I come across, is that everyone thinks that, you know what, my carbon footprint is all only this much. You know, how does it matter? Those guys, that company, that organization, that industry, that government, they should all be doing and taking big steps. I think this is the biggest challenge for us to really move the needle of sustainability. I think, please own it. It is you who will make the difference, because you broke it, so you better own it, right? And when you start with this intention, possibly you will uncover so many opportunities in your GCC centers, in your buildings, perhaps at your home, in your lifestyle, and in your community, and take this stewardship, and I think we should go ahead, right? This is what I wanted to say. So far as what we are doing at Schneider, today, Schneider, we'll be completing 60 years in India next year. We have 34 sites. As we speak, half of our sites are zero CO2 sites, right? We recycle all the solid waste. We recycle all water. We are not a very heavy water-intensive kind of processes, but whatever water we consume, we kind of recycle. And we did not touch upon the other aspects of, social and those elements of ESG. On those aspects, I think we are doing also a significant amount of actions. Our gender pay parity is absolutely zero. We are at the same level of gender pay. Now, this is very interesting. I tell you, I came across this statistics. The rate at which gender pay is improving, it'll take 257 years to close the gender pay gap. That's the rate at which things are happening. So again, on these aspects, all of you are leaders here. You can take initiatives, and it's all on your shoulders.
Great. Thank you so much, Venkat. Abhilash, I had a couple of questions for you, right? One, I think that actually sounded more like climate evangelist giving a good speech, but that was one of the better ones that I've heard. Yeah. So thank you for that. Abhilash, it's always interesting, right? We all talk a lot, and you gave a few statistics. But what are like good consultants, we look for easy things which would have the highest impact. So from your understanding of how things affect, morning we had Jan talk about the butterfly effect. So what are some of those small behavioral things that Venkat mentioned, which we can do on our own or within our companies that will have the highest impact? Yeah. So just 2-3 takeaways for us, if you could highlight, that will be wonderful.
Oh, definitely, thanks. Actually, first I'm going to just point to what Venkat said, that if you've broken it, you own it. Yeah. And we're here to make you own it because we'll monitor it. We'll tell it to you. And we have been telling not just to the companies which are breaking, but their stakeholders and their shareholders. We're telling it to their legislators. There's a lot of climate litigation that's happening. Right. And the climate litigation funds which are raising. Yes. So you as a lawyer can go out in the market and raise 100 million that I'm going to go and sue a bunch of companies. You can come and buy data from me, and you can go and sue them in international court for environmental damage. So there has been a lot of transformation on that aspect. If Venkat is planting trees in Amazon, yes or no, I can actually monitor and tell you that. Also tell you the biodiversity of those trees and be like, ki usne monoculture kiya hai, wo actual forest nahi hai. So it's a lot of really focusing on accountability. And to your point, what can we do? I am very bullish on climate change. I think I'm the most bullish person here. And I think climate change or climate solutions are what was internet back in 1990s and early 2000s. And if we look at America, for instance, America has produced till date 25% of GHG emissions that is out in the planet. So we are 1.4 billion people. We are almost 20% of the global population, actually. And we have produced negligible emissions. Absolutely. Africa is another 1.2 billion people. We have produced negligible emissions, and 300 million people have produced almost 25% emissions in 300 years of history of existence. So as Indians and having this population and history and culture of existing on the planet for 4,000 years that we have done, which is the longest contiguous civilization after China, we actually have the best minds and skills to be able to leverage on that and build companies and organizations which will be parallel to the internet giants of yesterday. Because climate change is what internet was back 20 years ago. So if you're talking about Google and creating, where does real value come from? Talking about creating Google, Microsoft's, WhatsApp's, Facebook, that's all going to happen in climate change. And that should all ideally happen out of India. And I think that's the opportunity. The opportunity is not just to take care of our own system. That is too passive. That is too non-ambitious. The opportunity is to lead the world because we can. We produce 20% of the STEM graduates of the world. Think about that number, right? Yep. So if we have that much talent, and if we could invest that much talent, and I think time's up, so I'm just going to take 1 minute extra. Seher mentioned that the investment ecosystem hasn't changed. I think that's where we are almost sort of denying ourselves of the opportunity that we have. If we are just a little bit more risk takers and just a little bit more ambitious and take leadership on that, the opportunity and the impact that we can create is infinite.
Excellent. Mani, yes, you had a question.
Just one point, Siddhant. I'm quite optimistic on this topic. Our management, the ultimate management guru, Peter Drucker, said, if you can't measure it, you can't manage it, right? So a small example, what we did was a few Just pre-pandemic, we put a weighing scale on the food that we are wasting in our cafeteria, right? And we started publicizing that to our employees. And the first week, the wastage was 118 kilos on a weekly basis, right? The first 2-3 weeks. After 3 weeks, it went down to 18 kilos, right? So almost 90% fell when the employees started seeing that this is what they're causing, right? At the same time, now we have started measuring the carbon footprint of our software. I'm highly optimistic that once our engineers and engineers across the industry understand how they are contributing, I'm sure we'll find a way to manage this better.
Great, perfect. Thank you so much. I think this has been very enlightening and also thought-provoking, and to me at least very energetic session. It gives us ways and means that how we can actually reverse this climate change. Thank you so much. I think all of you are contributing brilliantly towards the cause, and hope all of us can do a small bit towards it as well. Thank you so much, each of you. Thank you.
Thank you.